Wavelength.
Mental illness doesn't have to be a life sentence.
Alcohol addiction, abuse, misuse is the same all over the globe.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
So it made me feel very confident that if we did have it in the state, we were going to know about it.
You should be having.
There'll be guys that are trained, but they don't feel like they're good enough to take their shirt off.
Almost everyone is a culprit of doom scrolling. Anyone who has a mobile phone.
On Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host, David, and tonight I'm joined by Jamie again. How are you doing?
What is up, Adelaide? I'm good. I am tired. I'm tired today. It's just, you know how it is, everyone. It's just like second last weekend of Fringe.
Yeah.
Like we've had the crescendo.
Yes.
And I'm just feeling it. Like loving it, but feeling it hard. Finished work super late last night.
Yes,
back at it again.
4 a.m. you got home.
4 a.m. I got home from work. Yeah, but it's been amazing. And here we are again today. No, I hope everyone's been having a great Fringe. Tonight on Wavelength, we're asking, is the recent rise in NewStart enough for those receiving it? And what about those of us still too young to be considered independent? We'll be asking all of those questions about the dog and more.
Wavelength is also going to explain why people have been spending millions on digital art this week. But next, we're talking about mental health first aid and letting you know why you should consider taking a course. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. I remember in high school, Jamie, in I think health class, I guess that's what it was, when they brought out those freaky dummies without arms and legs.
Yeah, so
and just
weird.
so pale and just look like they're dead. And they look like crash test dummies, and they teach you how to do CPR on them.
With the soulless eyes.
Yes.
Just no
staring
face.
At you. Yeah.
CPR always reminds me of that episode of The Office when they do CPR to staying alive.
Yes.
To the beat.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Staying alive, staying alive, saving lives, staying alive.
Saving alive.
So, staying alive. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so funny.
Yeah, well, traditional first aid is something we're all readily taught. We learn it in school. But what if the emergency at hand isn't physical but stemming from a mental health episode? What do you do then? Arj had a look for us, and now we're all considering taking on a mental health first aid course.
Wavelength. On Fresh 92.7.
In recent years, there's been a much bigger input and understanding around mental health illness. It's something that'll affect you or someone you know, with 1 in 5 Australians experiencing mental health illness. However, talking about mental health correctly and knowing what not to say to someone who's experiencing mental health illness can be very difficult. That's where a mental health first aid course can come in handy. Like first aid for physical issues, courses are designed to help you facilitate someone's health and get them on the path to seeking more professional help. I spoke to Dr Claire Kelly, Director of Research and Curriculum at Mental Health First Aid Australia.
In some ways, it's really a reflection of first aid, physical first aid, that many people would have attended a course like that. But there are some important differences. The focus is still on supporting somebody in the initial stages until professional help can be sought. But, of course, when it comes to mental health, we're not necessarily talking about a dramatic crisis that has suddenly happened. Mental illnesses tend to develop slowly over time. And so mental health first aid gives you the skills that you need to have a conversation with someone when you've started to notice that things have changed. So when somebody has started to really show difficulty in their day-to-day life, when some of the, when a bad day has become a bad week and a bad month. Mental health first aid also teaches you how to respond in a crisis, so a little bit more akin to what you would expect from first aid. But that's where somebody, for example, has experiencing suicidal thoughts, is having thoughts of suicide, or has experienced a traumatic event and is extremely distressed by that, or even when someone is perhaps because of intoxication with alcohol or another drug has started to become aggressive. Mostly it's really about teaching somebody how to have a compassionate and engaged conversation where the person is not being judged for the way that they're feeling, but has got the space to actually talk about how they've been feeling and hopefully start to view professional help as something that would be really positive for them.
So are these courses, are they designed for people who work with or work closely with people who have mental health illness, or is this for anyone?
It's for the public. Honestly, somebody who was working, it is for any member of the public, although people come for all sorts of reasons, and it can be about wanting to be able to support family members. The things that I often really love to hear is when one of our instructors has been training hairdressers, has been training taxi drivers, people who people talk to. You know, I think it's really important. And if a taxi driver listening to someone distressed and having had a really rough night and perhaps a bit intoxicated can have a quick conversation with them about, hey, you know, it might be a good idea to talk to somebody about what's going on in your life, then that's fantastic. And a hairdresser who perhaps sees somebody every few weeks or over a long time and has started to notice, you know, in a very sort of objective way that things have changed. Like, how wonderful is that? And then, of course, you know, we've got friends, family members, and our colleagues. You know, we spend so much time at work. We want everyone to be able to have a conversation like this.
I think that's really great, and I think it's a really good point that, you know, people who are in our lives, but what I would call in the periphery of our lives, so people who are like, you know, you're the barista who you see every other day. Oh, in my case with my severe caffeine addiction, every day. You know, if they notice, hey, you know, this guy, he's not tracking so well or seems a little bit down than he usually is, can sort of start that conversation.
Yes, and in a way that doesn't make a person feel judged. You know what I mean? A barista saying, hey, you know, you okay? I've noticed some changes. Do you want to chat? That's a lot easier sometimes than someone you know and have to see every day. You know, you can say to the barista, no, none of your business, and you can walk away. Yeah. And maybe the next day you've been thinking about it for long enough to say, gosh, you know, I really would like to talk to somebody about what's going on. There's sometimes mental health first aid is not one conversation, it's a series of little conversations over time.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Arch chatting with Dr. Claire Kelly about mental health first aid, a really interesting conversation and not something I'd considered really much before. And now I feel like I want to go out there and do a course.
Absolutely. I think it's actually quite groundbreaking and a really, really good idea. I think that for people in the public sphere working, interacting with people all the time, it's a really good thing to have in your back pocket, to have the toolkit essentially to, you know, like be able to calm people down and talk about what's happening if people are drinking, especially if there's like drinking involved. The taxi driver thing. So
true with the taxi driver and people like who work in bars that are around people all the time that you might not necessarily know them, but like if they're going through something and nobody else can help them, if you've got the toolkit to step in and lend them a hand and make sure that they don't really hurt themselves or others around them, then that's invaluable.
Give them the support they need or point them in the right direction. I think that this is a really cool step in the process of creating an industry standard.
Yeah, for sure.
Of bringing public health to more of the forefront of conversation and culture. It's a really, really positive way of doing that, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in so many jobs, you have to do first aid courses. Like it's mandatory to know how to use an EpiPen or to know how to do CPR or things like that. But mental health is often, I guess, not considered in that sort of same package. So I guess if we could say anything, it would be great to see more organisations get on board, make this part of their mandatory training for employees. And I mean, something that I'd like to do just out of interest.
Absolutely. And I think if this past year has shown us anything, it's that, you know, mental health is a really important issue and it's a thing that affects everyone.
Yeah.
So let's bring that to light and like move forward in a really positive way.
Totally with you. Anyway, coming up after the break, we'll be cracking into our main story of the evening about the recent changes to Centrelink payments. So stay tuned for that. You're listening to Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength with David and Jamie this evening, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. So, Jamie, you likely heard the other week that the Liberal Party has proposed a very meagre raise to the dole payments, about $25 a week for those receiving NewStart.
Look, for a country that is actually quite expensive to live and the cost of living is quite high, $25 doesn't get you very much. Yep. $25 is literally my Uber home from the city and I live 10 mins away.
It's literally like $3 a day.
That's like my Netflix subscription and like a bag of chips a week.
Yeah, it's absolutely nothing. Anyway, to get the lowdown on what this proposal actually means, Amila spoke with Jeff Borland, a professor in economics from Melbourne University.
Wavelength. on Fresh 92.7.
Since the government has announced a permanent increase of $50 per fortnight to JobSeeker, there has been backlash from welfare groups. The Prime Minister has described the decision as appropriate and that the shift is moving towards a normal safety net. To get to the heart of the issue, I spoke to economics professor Jeff Borland from the University of Melbourne, who says it's possible to raise the rate by $125 per week without deterring people from seeking work.
Even with that size of increase to JobSeeker, there'd still be a large gap to what we would expect an unemployed person to be able to earn if they moved into paid work. And so there'd still be a large financial incentive for them to move into paid work. Just to give a couple of examples of that, even if JobSeeker was to be increased by $125 per week, that would still just bring it to about 54% of what someone working full-time on the minimum wage would earn. In other words, even just moving on to a job at the minimum wage, you'd basically double the amount that you were earning. Another way of thinking about it is to say, well, where does JobSeeker line up against what people who are working full-time, for example, actually earn? And if you do that, what you find is that basically sort of only 1 out of 100 people who are in full-time jobs are earning at or below the level of JobSeeker. In other words, kind of 99 out of 100 jobs out there are paying more than JobSeeker. So even with this large increase in JobSeeker, there'd still be a financial incentive to move into paid work. Another really important point, I think, is that often we focus on, well, JobSeeker is this amount of money, so it creates financial incentives or disincentives. But, we all know that, a huge part of value that we derive from work is non-financial. The enjoyment we get from work, the self-esteem, the health benefits. Studies that sort of suggest that, as much as 50% of the sort of overall benefit we derive from work is non-financial. And obviously nothing about that's going to change if we change JobSeeker. So there's also, even with an increase in JobSeeker, this huge kind of set of other factors which are going to motivate people to want to get into paid work.
So, the government's announced that there will be a $25 weekly increase to this, but will that increase people's capacity to search for work in any meaningful way?
I don't think so. I don't think it's an amount that's really sufficient to allow, a big increase in what people spend on trying to obtain work, like transport for job interviews, say, clothing for job interviews, or training they might have to do. And as well, it's not enough to reduce the financial stress that I think often for some people on JobSeeker, crowds out being able to think about or spend time on looking for work. So I can't see this size of increase having an appreciable effect on capacity to search for work.
Do you think there were any alternative approaches that the government could have taken in regards to JobSeeker?
I think that you could have increased JobSeeker by a lot more without negatively affecting incentives to search for work. And increasing income is kind of the main way to assist people who are unemployed to have a decent standard of living and be able to afford the kind of expenses that are associated with job search.
In your view, could it take another 20 or so years for the government to consider increasing the rate again?
Well, I certainly hope not, because, I guess, as your question's suggesting, the problem of the current level being, too low is a result of 20 plus years of not being, adjusted upwards. What the increase that's been granted doesn't make substantial inroads against that. So it's not like kind of, we've gone back to, where we were 20 years ago. There's still a lot to catch up on. And so I think hopefully the impetus and pressure for further increases remains, even though there has just been this increase. I think we're going to be in a dire situation if it is, 20 years, more until there's another increase.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Emila speaking with Jeff Borland from Melbourne University about the proposed raise to the dole. That bill, which is still sort of in its bill stage, hasn't actually passed Parliament yet. It's pretty much expected to pass Parliament now. So it got the backing of a Senate committee last week.
Yeah.
Which means it's pretty much
going to
pass, go and become law, which means this little raise, which I'm sure will be welcome. Like any raise is obviously good.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's not, but it's clearly not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just about, do people have enough money they can to support themselves?
That's it.
In a really hard financial time.
It's a tough time for a lot of people out there, and this sort of support, well, welcome, probably could be going further.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. We'll be getting back into our story about changes to Centrelink very soon, but for now we're cracking into our weekly segment where Hamish explains what the hell has happened this week.
What the hell is going on this week? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Well, it was all about the Royals this week, and honestly, I'm royally over it. Okay, I get one of those, that's it. Meghan Markle revealed in her blockbuster interview with talk show queen Oprah Winfrey that members of one of the last pure white bloodlines in the world were actually worried about the colour of her son's skin, which I find hard to believe because they've already shown they're not too concerned with people's skin colour, considering Prince Philip has been displaying an unmistakably purple hue for the last decade. After the bombshell allegations were made, however, it was said the Queen was distressed by these claims and is now set to grill senior royals over their involvement, which is honestly a mental image that absolutely terrifies me. I imagine she has an actual human-sized sandwich press in which these subjects are literally going to be grilled alive and then served with tea and crumpets. Health Minister Greg Hunt was hospitalised with cellulitis this week, while Victorian Premier Dan Andrews suffered a serious fall down a flight of stairs, which has left him with a significant spinal injury, but he's Labor, so no one really cared that much. Meanwhile, General Attorney Christian Porter and Defence Minister Linda Reynolds both took sick leave this week after suffering from serious bouts of rape allegations and victim shaming, respectively. But while Dan Andrews simply damaged his spine, these two are just spineless. Political rock star Mark McGowan won a second term in power as WA's Premier with one of the biggest wins in Australian politics ever. The election was called after just 45 minutes of polling. And you can now fit the entire Liberal Party of WA in the back of a taxi. And in sport, the AFL confirmed that the grand final will return to its traditional 2:30pm time slot at the MCG this year, which is great because now I can pass out on the couch at a much more respectable time. Finally, it was International Women's Day this week, also known as the annual triggering of middle-aged males most likely called Barry or Trent. And luckily, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, as a father of 2 daughters, was more than happy to celebrate the occasion. Thanks, mate. And that's what the hell's been going on this week.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to Wavelength. Before the break, we heard from a Miller who dug deep into the proposed changes to NewStart.
But for many young people, they still don't even receive NewStart themselves. This is because the age of independence rule, which means the government payments for people aged 22 and under, go straight to their parent or guardian. For many, this means that they don't see a cent of what they're entitled to. To find out more about this, Miller sat down with Kristin O'Connell from the Australian Unemployed Workers Union.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Another issue that has found itself in the spotlight is the demand to lower Centrelink's age of independence, which currently sits at 22. An online petition has caught traction with over 11,000 signatures. The push to lower the age to 18 would mean that those receiving benefits such as youth allowance would no longer have their payments affected by their parents' or partner's income. I talked to the Australian Unemployed Workers Union spokesperson Kristin O'Connell about how this is impacting young Aussies.
So many young people are affected by this. And in fact, it's not just young people who can be excluded from payments because of their family situation. People who have a partner are also excluded if their partner earns a certain amount of income, and it's actually quite a low amount, about the minimum wage. So we've got people who may have no money of their own, maybe studying, maybe moving out of home so they can be near university or TAFE or wherever they are, and they're still unable to access income support. Even though it's such a pittance, it would still actually help them to get through their study. And if their parents have a certain level of income or certain assets, then they're excluded. And it doesn't, of course, mean that your parents are willing to support you or even able to support you. This traps so many young people into unsafe family environments, and it traps people in family environments where they may be experiencing partner violence as well.
How do you think Centrelink or the Centrelink system can reconsider those who don't receive this financial support from their family or partner if they're under 22?
We don't think that anyone's eligibility for welfare payments should be based on someone else's income, regardless of whether they're willing to support you. People need to have independence and agency, even if their parents are, loving and supportive and want to help them get through uni. So if someone is trying to set out on their life, they should have choice and control and not feel that they're dependent on someone else's decision to live their life the way that they want to. Now, of course, these payments don't actually allow anyone to live the life that they want to, but at the very least, people should have the option of getting onto a payment irrespective of their family situation.
Where has Centrelink been inadequate in helping young Australians?
Government, both Labor and Coalition, for a few decades now have been slashing away both at the public service, and so the staff who work at Centrelink, we've had a shrinking number over time, and lots of those call centres are being outsourced with people who don't really know what they're doing, privatised services like Serco. These organisations don't know what they're doing, and they give people the wrong information and they make the wrong decision. On top of that, we've had the government try to use unemployed people to make budget savings on a mass scale. So, for example, people will often have an application for support or for exemptions rejected straight away, but in fact they are eligible for that exemption, and if they appeal the decision, they will often find that they do succeed as a result of that process. But of course, most people trust that if they've been rejected, that that's on fair grounds, or the policies are being applied correctly. And unfortunately, we again have just seen this pattern of incorrect decisions, whether they're made intentionally or unintentionally, affecting so many people's lives in a really negative way.
Is there any type of support in place for people aged 16 to 18 apart from youth allowance?
The government has placed great reliance on privatised crisis services and charities to give us support to meet our basic needs. And it's totally unacceptable because, of course, firstly, no one should be depending on charity. It should be the government's responsibility to make sure for all of us that we can do things like eat regularly, pay our bills, be able to set up things like electricity accounts and internet accounts if we are below the age of 18, pay rent and get medical care when it's needed. So we would say that what needs to happen is basically the government should stop funding crisis services to deliver these things and make sure that payments are adequate.
What would you consider a realistic timeline to see any of these changes implemented?
So we are fighting extremely hard, and in fact we have become even more determined and angry since these disgusting announcements that they've made. We know that this government does not care about our well-being, and we do not expect that we are suddenly going to have income support above the poverty line when the bill comes to Parliament in the second half of March. But we know that the government has shown that they can do it. And we know that there are big corporations, the types of companies that the government normally listens to, who agree with us. And even if they don't want to see payments at the poverty line, they want to see them a lot higher than they are now. So there is opportunity under a coalition government to see things improve from where they are.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Miller speaking with Kristin O'Connell from the Australian Unemployed Workers Union. Some really powerful words at the end there. Really talking about, I guess, the age of independence a lot, which is, I think, something I really found quite interesting.
Absolutely. Look, if we're old enough to vote at 18, we're old enough to be able to control our own money. Like, it's actually it's super contradictory that if you're 21 but you still live with your parents, you can't have control of that money. Like, it's either like accept us as adults and what you're doing, we're able to do everything we're doing. We're drinking, we're voting, and like treat us as adults, government. Like, it's just...
I can't believe the age is 22.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. And also she had some really valid points about, how it traps people into like unsafe environments as well, and kind of pushes them towards those unsafe environments because it's all about, trying to survive, have shelter over your back, food on the table, and the government doesn't prioritise well-being. I think that's something that we're seeing more and more as time goes on. I think
that's very true. And I mean, like the raise doesn't even really seem to bring it up to like the poverty line. So that's another thing that is quite distressing.
And that's a really interesting point in itself, where it's like improving the poverty line through prioritising well-being, because I think that's just that's the way of bringing the poverty line up.
Yeah. Next, Wavelength is going to explain why people have been buying and selling memes online this week, some for millions of dollars.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
So, David,
Yes.
this week you've been talking my ear off about people that have been buying and selling digital art online this week. And to be honest, it was a little confusing.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It is a bit confusing. You sort of have to understand like the blockchain, Bitcoin, digital art, and also just understand that some people have made so much money off buying like Bitcoin.
Millions.
Like people that never would have otherwise had this much money and now just like have nothing to do with it. So they're buying memes basically.
Right.
For millions.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
It's insane.
Anyway, to explain it even further, here's David explaining why people are spending millions in crypto on digital art this week.
Wavelength explains on Fresh 92.7.
Over the last week or so, a huge new trend in the art world has really taken hold. It's a trend that's seen millions of dollars passed hands to digital artists who've been reaping the rise of non-fungible tokens, or NFTs for short. The craze has heightened so much that just this week, a digital artist named Beeple sold a digital work for $69 million US. But this isn't your usual kind of buying and selling, nor is it your usual kind of uppity art collectors engaging in their trades. This craze is all on the blockchain. Yeah, I rolled my eyes too when I first heard about it. Bitcoin is, first of all, really hard to understand, and the tech, it's not the most thrilling thing to have explained to you. So I won't bore you too much with the technicalities. But to understand NFTs, we need to do a little lesson. Essentially, artists are turning their digital works into tokens, a lot like one Bitcoin, that are unique and coded with ownership, so it's permanently on a record. These tokens are then connected to specific works of art and bought or sold using cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum on trading platforms like Foundation. It's on that platform that Beeple made his fortune. Tons of artists are throwing their hat in the ring with the experiment too. Elon Musk's girlfriend and pop star Grimes has made a fortune this week, for example. The idea is that artists are finally being paid what they feel is due after years of the internet gobbling up their work and shared essentially for free. I hear you screaming, if it's digital art, can't I just screenshot it? Yeah, you can. But collectors are hoping these digital coins they're collecting will rise in value. It's essentially like buying or selling shares, commodities, or even physical art. The art trade has long been a place for wealthy individuals to launder money, buying works that they hope will rise in value to sell at a later date. This is essentially the same thing, only crypto billionaires are the wealthy people now. Here's the kicker though, generating just one single NFT for one piece of art uses as much energy as one person uses in 19 years. As such, artists are being wildly criticised for their participation in this ecological nightmare. Every day, life feels more like cyberpunk. Wake me up when this insanity ends.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Right now, we've got our favourite weekly segment called Heaps Good News. This week, Aj has got the goods for us.
I know there's gonna be
Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
It's that time of the show again where one of the dedicated journos from the team scourge the internet to find a few nuggets of good news to help lift you up in the wake of all the dreary and drudge that is the news cycle. Rarely do we get to talk about sunshines and puppies on this show, so to kick things off, here's a story about a puppy. A week-long campaign to find a lost dog has come to a satisfying conclusion last Wednesday when Michelle Buckley was reunited with her dog Hunter. Michelle's two dogs, Lexi and Hunter, both went missing on the 2nd. Fortunately, Lexi returned 2 days later. However, Hunter remained on the loose. Desperate to find out where her beloved pooch had wound up, Michelle hit up a psychic who said Hunter was stuck and near some berries. And though the medium wasn't able to pinpoint Hunter's location, she was bang on. Hunter was found caught in vineyard nets just east of Mount Barker. In a move to bolster and promote tourism, the federal government have unveiled a new tourism support package which will help provide around 800,000 half-price airline tickets. The scheme will encourage Aussies to take an interstate holiday. With the exceptions of flights from Adelaide to Kangaroo Island, all the discounted routes are from interstate travel only. Discounted tickets can be purchased between the beginning of April and the end of July for travel through until the end of September. Qantas says discounted flights will be available online from April 1st for travel through to May. And that's the heaps good news for this week. Thank you guys very much for joining me. Back to David and Jamie.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Aj. What on earth was that? So I need to meet this psychic.
Right?
They clearly know something. Like, that was how?
How?
They got it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear about these stories where, like, is it coincidence or is it not? Like, there's something going on here.
I don't know. I'm very into it.
I buy it. I'm like,
buy
yum,
it
yum,
too.
yum, mate. I love it all.
I don't know. I'm so down for believing in psychics and stuff.
So do I. And I also just like to believe it. Like, I choose to just believe it because it's fun. It makes life more interesting.
And that makes me believe it even more. They found Hunter.
Oh, Hunter, so glad you're home.
Stuck in Mount Barker.
I lost my keys. Can I text the psychic and get her to tell me where the keys are?
Yo.
Oh my God. I lost my keys last week. I found them yesterday under the bathroom sink.
What?
How the hell do they get under the bathroom sink?
What are you doing?
I don't know. I need a psychic on speed dial.
Yeah, you do. Are you going to get one of those flights? The half-price flights?
Yeah, I am actually. My friend messaged me the other day and was like, hey, let's get these half-price flights. And I was like, what? But yeah, absolutely. Just jump on it.
There's like 800,000, so you probably have to get in pretty early, but I believe in you. I reckon you'll get them.
I think we can do it. Maybe let's go on a vacay together, David.
Yeah, let's go. Where are we going?
Let's do wavelength. Yeah, wavelength on the road.
Where are we going to go though? Where is our half-price flight taking us? Which regional centre of Australia?
So many options.
You can just go to the Gold Coast though. It seems like it's not that regional. It's just like the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's do it.
Let's go to Wagga Wagga or something.
Anyway, that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thanks for listening.
Wavelength.